Hello everyone, welcome to the first video on this channel, Saving the American Dream. If you're interested in topics related to American politics, go ahead and please subscribe, and also click the notification bell so you're reminded of when there's new videos. Now for our first topic, it's not necessarily starting off on a happy foot for this channel, but we're going to be talking about the devastating wildfires in California. And I do find this necessary because of how the fires unfortunately are being addressed in the media. First of all, let's be completely honest and say, yes, luckily California does have a lot of firefighters who are trying to do everything they could. And we should be thankful for their bravery in fighting these fires. But at the same time, we need to still hold politicians in California accountable for some of the factors that led to the severity of these fires that they're currently battling, and the lack of them being able to battle them as efficiently as they potentially could. How much could firemen do if there's not enough water to fight these fires? One of the ugly truths of these fires currently is that there's fire hydrants where there's no water. And this is part of the system failure. And it really shouldn't be when you're having officials in charge of the water system being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do their job properly. And yet now when you have a devastating fire that has already killed over 10 individuals, has led to the loss of thousands of homes, devastation that will take years to rebuild, there's no water in order to actually put out these fires. And I do find it troubling when the articles discussing these fires try to separate all the factors that go into why these fires got as bad as they did. Yes, we need to be honest and say that there are factors currently making the fires worse, such as the winds, that there's nothing these politicians necessarily could have done. We're all aware politicians cannot mandate legislation to control winds and the wind speeds, wind direction. But at the same time, when you don't have water for firemen to fight the fires, you're not going to be able to put these fires out. That's something that California politicians could have controlled, and instead they failed to do so. The other topic is controlled burns. Controlled burns have been practiced by Native Americans in the United States for hundreds of years. And yet now, in California, they haven't been taking it seriously for the past several decades. And part of the problem is that when you have all this dead brush available to make these fires worse, you make the fire a heck of a lot worse than it would have been if you were removing the dead brush. And part of the problem that I find with some of these journalists is none of them have tried to light a fire in these lives before, like people such as myself who have done Boy Scouts. You need very dead, very dry material in order to start a fire. You need the kindling. When you have all this dead brush in California forests, that is a lot of fuel in order for these fires to get as big as they do and then create the devastation that they do. These fires did not start in the middle of neighborhoods in California as articles are trying to frame it. When you look at the pictures showing the origins of the Palisades fire, you see that it's in forested area. It didn't start in the middle of a residential street. Obviously, it spread to the residential streets and unfortunately devastated almost the entire neighborhood, but that wasn't its starting point. So when you have politicians not making sure there's enough water, not making sure that dead brush is being cleared out, there's controlled burns, which are also beneficial in other ways. What's also terrible is these politicians are trying to say, oh, we need to care about the environment. But controlled burns are beneficial for native plants as well, in order to give them space to grow. Doing controlled burns as well can help weed out invasive species that do not have the deep root systems that native plants do to grow in these environments. Some plants need a fire ever so often in order to grow more properly and to become more healthier plants. And yet, we're really not seeing enough of that done in California. But now we're seeing journalists trying to make excuses for these California politicians, which is troubling, especially when we're well aware that Newsom potentially has presidential aspirations. But he's failed California in multiple spots. So why should we be potentially protecting a politician who's not doing enough in his home state to properly run it to potentially become the next president of the United States? And now, yes, it's no secret that everything in life costs money to do almost. Very little that we could do in this life is free. But the problem is with Newsom, we also know that he has a habit of sometimes wasting money. How $24 billion has gone to homelessness, and yet we're not seeing nowhere near the amount of homes being built that you would expect for that amount of money. So when you need enough funds in order to maintain a proper water system so firemen have water to fight huge devastating fires like we're seeing now, oh, well, the money was spent on other things and we're not necessarily sure where, since there's nowhere near the number of housing units you would be expect to be built for that type of money. And then when you also look in California, how he's also looking to spend money on other things for illegal immigrants, such as healthcare, paying for in-state college tuition. Okay, that's one thing if you want to help some of these dreamers who were brought as children, but what about individuals who are now migrating as adults and who broke immigration law? You're also going to provide them free benefits when you're not able to provide the basic needs, such as having water in the hydrants? Or even in garden hoses, because Californians have been, not Californians, Canadians have been discussing on social media, a little confused, saying, well, they're constantly told before wildfires approach in Canada to always make sure that you soak your home to try to also prevent the homes from being destroyed by these fires. But the problem is in California, Californians are responding saying they tried to do so, but just like in the hydrants, there's no water for their garden hoses either. So they weren't able to do that either. And it just seems really dishonest, this approach to how when people are discussing the fires, trying to absolve Newsom, the mayor, Karen Bass in LA, of any wrongdoing, by taking each factor and discussing it separately and never discussing all these factors together. One, we keep on talking nowadays how we should try to examine everything with a multidisciplinary approach in order to better understand situations. And yet, when this has been a topic, now when it comes to something, when we have politicians like Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass facing backlash, people don't want to discuss that. And we also need outside experts to be discussing the matter, because an article from The Independent from the UK, British media, that was discussing the fires, they're quoting a fire expert from LA County about what could have possibly be done differently, and saying, oh no, there really wasn't anything that could have been done with the controlled burns. That wasn't possible. Yeah, this expert is trying to save his job as one of the people over the fire department for LA County. These people don't want to lose their job, so of course they're going to say, oh, there was nothing that could have been done. We need outside experts to really examine the situation and actually do a detailed analysis, rather than having California politicians trying to save their own careers and claim there was absolutely nothing they could have done better in order to prevent some of the devastation with these fires. And also, the other truth, that one factor, and the ugly truth, is with home insurance. People are trying to blame the insurance companies, as several have been pulling out of California, not offering new policies. Some people received notification that their policies were canceled. And yes, this is definitely infuriating, but California has created a toxic environment for people to try to get insurance, because California still does not allow insurance companies to account for future events. Instead, insurance policies can only go based off of historic data. This makes it hard for the actuaries who try to predict how much insurance companies will have to pay out. It makes this job incredibly difficult. And the harsh reality is that you're not going to have insurance companies then offering insurance, which we've seen. We've seen insurance companies pulling out of the state, not offering new policies, canceling existing policies because it's no longer feasible, because they know more and more devastating fires are potentially going to be at risk of occurring in California. Hopefully, based off of the horrific wind conditions, that this fire is not going to be replicated anytime soon because of the devastating winds that have contributed to the devastating degree of these fires. But at the same time, California also needs to address the legislation with home insurance, because now you have people who lost their homes, and if they weren't able to get it reinsured by another insurance company, how are they going to rebuild? Is California going to give these people funds like they were giving funds to people who broke immigration law and also expect free handouts? What about the California taxpayers who followed the law, did everything they could, tried to buy insurance, and then had their policy canceled only months before a devastating fire that took everything from them? And then even with the fire department itself, which I encourage you to look into, with Karen Bass and how she needs to refocus the priority of the fire department, where now you have fires potentially being hired based off of diversity rather than focusing on, are they capable of doing the job? And people are bringing this up as a talking point because you have a fire chief in charge of diversity for the department being paid $399,000 a year, who, when asked if she could save someone's husband, replied by saying, oh, well, that's not her fault that he got into that position. So are we going to try to say now that firefighters don't have to save men in fires? They got themselves in that position? That's never been a rule for any fire department. And as someone who not only was a certified lifeguard, but also a certified lifeguard instructor through the American Red Cross, women also were alongside me, becoming lifeguards, becoming lifeguard instructors, and yet they also had to take the same exact physical test and show that they could also save men from the swimming pool. They weren't exempt and said, you don't have to do that, that's not part of your job description. It was equal requirements for everyone, and we need to make sure that Karen Bass changes this attitude for the LA Fire Department going further, that yes, it shouldn't matter your background, gender, etc. to become a firefighter, as long as you could pass the physical exams, which are crucial in order to prove that you could do your job as a firefighter in the future. And with all these factors that are failing people, it's no wonder why these fires got out of control as much as they did. Hopefully, going forward, California changes some of these policies in order to try to prevent fires in the future, and also to get harder on some of the regulations too with housing, where California needs to make sure that it is fast-tracking permits to rebuild these neighborhoods, but at the same time, as pointed out, some of these homes also, unfortunately, that have been lost were built before 1995, when different requirements for fire-grade materials to be used were put in place. So that's one of the few regulations that, idealistically, unfortunately, even though will add to the reconstruction cost of homes, you can't really do away with that. But hopefully, Newsom stays true to his word, at least, that yes, he will help rebuild these communities, but he also still needs to go forward. How do we prevent these fires in the future? Making sure that there's an adequate water source, making sure that homes could be insured instead of having archaic laws for insurance companies, making sure that controlled burns are happening, that dead brush is being cleared out, and making sure that not too much water is being diverted in order to save smelt. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, comment with any of your opinions, whether you like this video or absolutely disagreed. Thank you so much for your attention.